A millionaire pulls a poor girl out of a brothel, but the next day, a black truck hunts them down. Maria sat on the edge of her bed, staring out the tiny cracked window of her room. The pale morning light cast shadows across the faded wallpaper, highlighting the worn edges of a life that had unraveled too soon. At 20 years old, Maria felt as if she had lived through a century of heartache. Each day in the brothel blurred into the next, a cycle of forced smiles, whispered prayers, and hollow laughter that echoed through the dimly lit halls. Life hadn't always been this way. Maria had grown up in a modest village, surrounded by fields and hills that seemed to stretch on forever. Her parents, while not wealthy, had done their best to give her and her siblings a stable life. Maria remembered her childhood fondly, the way her mother hummed old lullabies while cooking, or how her father taught her to read from the one tattered book they owned. Those memories felt like another lifetime now. When Maria was 17, everything changed. Her father's sudden death left the family in financial ruin. Bills piled up, and her mother's health began to deteriorate under the strain. Maria, the eldest, dropped out of school to help. She took odd jobs, cleaning houses, selling vegetables in the market, anything to keep food on the table. But it was never enough. Desperation drove her to the city, where she hoped to find stable work. It was there, amid the chaos of crowded streets and towering buildings, that she met Robert. He was older, confident, and carried himself with an air of wealth that was intoxicating to someone like Maria, who had never known luxury. He frequented the cafe where she worked as a waitress, always leaving generous tips and lingering to chat with her after her shift. Maria was wary at first, but Robert's charm wore her defenses down. He made her feel seen, special, a stark contrast to the constant struggle that defined her life. Their relationship was brief but intense, filled with stolen moments in hotel rooms and promises she desperately wanted to believe. When Maria discovered she was pregnant, her world tilted. She had envisioned a future where Robert would stand by her, where they would raise their child together. But when she broke the news, his reaction was a punch to the gut. "This isn't my responsibility," he said coldly, pacing the room. "I can't deal with this right now. You'll figure it out. You're resourceful." With those words, Robert walked out of her life, leaving behind a check that barely covered her rent for the month. Maria was heartbroken, but she didn't have the luxury of wallowing. She resolved to keep the baby and make a life for herself, even if it meant starting from nothing. Her pregnancy was difficult, both physically and emotionally. Alone in the city, she struggled to find work. Employers saw her swollen belly and turned her away. Her savings dwindled, and soon Maria was on the verge of homelessness. It was during one particularly desperate night, while she wandered the streets in search of shelter, that she met Claudia. Claudia was the owner of a brothel tucked away in the darker corners of the city. She had a reputation for taking in young women who had nowhere else to turn. Maria had heard the whispers about the place, but had never imagined she would end up there. That night, however, Claudia's offer seemed like salvation. "You need a roof over your head and food in your belly," Claudia had said, her voice smooth and persuasive. "I can provide that. You'll work hard, but you'll survive." "And isn't that what matters?" Maria agreed, telling herself it was temporary, that once she had enough money, she would leave. But the months turned into years, and the brothel became both her prison and her lifeline. She gave birth to Liam in the small room Claudia had assigned to her. The other women helped as much as they could, pooling their resources to buy diapers and formula. Liam was her light in the darkness, a reminder of why she endured the indignities of her work. Despite everything, Maria was determined to give Liam a better life. She saved every spare coin, dreaming of the day she could take him far away from the brothel. But reality had a way of crushing those dreams. The cost of living, the stigma of her work, and the lack of opportunities for someone like her left Maria feeling trapped. Liam was now 2 years old, a lively child with a head full of curls and a smile that could melt even the hardest hearts. He was the reason Maria kept going, even on the nights when her body ached and her spirit felt broken. She shielded him from the truth of her work, hiding him in the back room under Carmen's care while she entertained clients. One evening, as Maria was putting Liam to bed, the brothel buzzed with unusual activity. The other women whispered among themselves, their voices tinged with excitement and fear. Maria caught snippets of their conversation as she walked past the parlor. "Did you hear? Claudia says the whole place is booked for tomorrow night. Who's the client?" "Some sheikh from Dubai. Apparently, he's incredibly wealthy." Maria felt a knot form in her stomach. High-profile clients were rare, but when they came, the stakes were always higher. The women would be expected to put on their best performances, and Claudia would tolerate no mistakes. Maria pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on tucking Liam into his makeshift bed. "Mama has to work tomorrow," she whispered, brushing a kiss against his forehead. "But I'll be back before you know it." That night, as Maria lay in bed, she couldn't shake the sense of unease. The thought of the sheikh's visit lingered in her mind, a shadow she couldn't quite place. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer, not for herself, but for Liam, the one person who gave her life meaning. Tomorrow would be a turning point, though Maria had no way of knowing just how much her life was about to change. The following evening, the brothel was unrecognizable. The usual dim lighting had been replaced with ornate lanterns, casting warm, flickering light across the walls. Fresh flowers adorned the tables, their sweet scent masking the usual stale perfume and cigarette smoke that hung in the air. Claudia, in her sharp heels and tailored dress, moved briskly through the halls, barking orders at the staff. "Everything must be perfect tonight," she said, her voice as sharp as a whip. "Our guest expects nothing but the best. Don't embarrass me." Maria watched from the corner of the parlor as the other women primped and preened, their nervous laughter filling the room. She adjusted her dress, a simple black gown that hugged her figure, and tried to quiet the storm of anxiety in her chest. Carmen, who had agreed to watch Liam for the night, squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. "You'll be fine, Maria," she said with a warm smile. "Just remember, he's just another man." But Maria knew this wasn't just another man. The whispers had been growing all day. He was a sheikh, a man of immense wealth and power. Some said he owned half of Dubai, while others claimed he was a mysterious figure who rarely showed his face in public. As the clock struck 9, the brothel fell silent. A sleek black car pulled up outside, its polished exterior gleaming under the streetlights. A driver stepped out, opening the back door with practiced precision. Maria held her breath as the man stepped out. He was tall, his tailored suit fitting him like a second skin. His dark hair was neatly combed, and his sharp features carried an air of authority. But it was his eyes that struck Maria the most, piercing and calculating, as though he could see through the walls she had built around herself. The room seemed to shrink as he entered, his presence commanding attention. Claudia greeted him with a deep bow, her voice unusually deferential as she welcomed him inside. "Sheikh Khalid al-Rashid," she said, her smile polished and professional. "We are honored to have you here tonight. Please allow me to introduce you to our finest ladies." Khalid nodded curtly, his expression unreadable. He moved through the room slowly, his gaze drifting over each woman with the precision of someone making an important decision. The other women giggled nervously, their smiles faltering under his intense scrutiny. When his eyes landed on Maria, the room seemed to freeze. She felt his gaze linger, as though he were peeling back the layers of her soul. Maria forced herself to meet his eyes, even as her heart pounded in her chest. "Her," Khalid said, his voice low and commanding. He pointed to Maria, and the murmurs in the room grew louder. "I wish to speak with her privately." Claudia's smile widened, though Maria could see the tension in her eyes. "Of course, Your Excellency. Maria, please show Sheikh Khalid to your room." Maria's legs felt like lead as she led Khalid down the narrow hallway. She pushed open the door to her small, dimly lit room, her hands trembling. Khalid followed, his movements slow and deliberate. The door clicked shut behind him, and Maria turned to face him, unsure of what to expect. "Sit," Khalid said, gesturing to the small chair by the window. Maria obeyed, perching on the edge of the chair as he remained standing. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice softer now, though it still carried an edge of authority. "Maria," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. For a long moment, Khalid said nothing. He studied her, his dark eyes scanning her face as though searching for something. Maria felt exposed, as though he could see every scar and secret she tried to hide. "You're different," he said, finally. Maria blinked, unsure how to respond. I don't understand." Khalid crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed, his gaze never leaving hers. "You don't belong here. I can see it in your eyes. You're not like the others." Maria felt a lump form in her throat. She wanted to argue, to tell him that he was wrong, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she lowered her gaze, her fingers twisting nervously in her lap. "Why are you here?" Khalid asked, his tone more curious than judgmental. Maria hesitated, unsure how much to reveal, but something about Khalid's demeanor made her feel as though she could speak freely. She took a deep breath and began to tell her story. The death of her father, the crushing weight of poverty, and the betrayal that had left her raising Liam alone. Khalid listened intently, his expression unreadable. When Maria finished, she looked up to find him watching her with a mixture of pity and something else she couldn't quite place. "And your son?" he asked. "Where is he now?" "He's here," Maria admitted, her voice barely audible. "One of the other women is watching him for me." Khalid nodded slowly, as though processing her words. He stood and began pacing the small room, his hands clasped behind his back. "Do you want to leave this place?" he asked suddenly, stopping to look at her. Maria's heart skipped a beat. "Of course," she said, her voice trembling. "But it's not that simple. I have no money, no way to provide for my son outside of this place." Khalid was silent for a long moment. Then, to Maria's surprise, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "I can help you," he said, his tone firm. "I can buy your freedom from this place. But first, I need to understand more." Maria stared at him, her mind racing. Was he serious? Could someone like him really change her life? Before she could respond, Khalid turned toward the door. "We'll speak more tomorrow," he said, "but understand this. I do not make empty promises." With that, he was gone, leaving Maria alone in the room, her thoughts spinning. For the first time in years, she allowed herself a glimmer of hope. Maria couldn't sleep that night. Her mind replayed the conversation with Sheikh Khalid over and over, each word ringing with possibilities she was too afraid to believe. The thought of leaving the brothel was a dream she had buried long ago, and now this stranger, a man who could buy and sell entire cities, had reopened the door to that dream. The next morning, Maria woke early, as she always did, to tend to Liam. The boy greeted her with his usual sunny smile, and Maria felt her heart swell. For all the hardships she endured, Liam was her anchor, the one thing that kept her from succumbing to despair. "Morning, Mama," he chirped, reaching for the piece of bread she handed him. "Good morning, sweetheart," Maria replied, smoothing his unruly curls. As she watched Liam eat, Maria's thoughts wandered to Khalid. What had he meant by, "I can help you"? Was it just talk, or did he truly intend to intervene in her life? And if he did, what would that mean for her and Liam? Later that day, as Maria prepared for the evening's work, Claudia appeared in her doorway. The older woman's sharp eyes held a mix of curiosity and calculation. "Maria," she said, leaning against the doorframe, "our esteemed guest has requested your company again tonight." Maria's stomach flipped. "Did he say why?" Claudia smirked. "He didn't. But let me give you some advice. Men like him don't waste their time unless they see something they want. Whatever it is, don't ruin this opportunity. A man like Khalid could change your life if you play your cards right." Maria bit her lip, unsure how to respond. Claudia's words were pragmatic, but Maria couldn't shake the feeling that Khalid's intentions went beyond the transactional nature of the brothel. That evening, Khalid returned, his arrival marked by the same air of quiet authority that had silenced the room the night before. Maria waited nervously in her small room, adjusting her dress for the 10th time as the minutes crawled by. When Khalid entered, Maria stood, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. He waved for her to sit, taking the same spot on the edge of the bed as the night before. "Did you think about what I said?" he asked, his voice calm but insistent. Maria nodded. "I did. But I don't understand why you want to help me. What do you stand to gain?" Khalid leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Let's just say I've seen enough suffering in my life. I can't fix the world, but if I can change one life for the better, why shouldn't I?" His words caught Maria off guard. She had expected an ulterior motive, but Khalid's tone was genuine, almost vulnerable. "I don't know how you could help," Maria said honestly. "Even if you bought my freedom, what would I do? I have no skills, no education. And I have Liam to think about." Khalid nodded thoughtfully. "Let me take care of the details. If you trust me, I can give you and your son a life you've never imagined." Maria hesitated, her instincts battling with the faint glimmer of hope that had taken root. "I want to believe you," she said finally. "But it's hard. People have promised to help me before, and it never ends well." Khalid's expression softened. "I understand. Trust isn't given. It's earned. Let me earn yours." The conversation lingered in Maria's mind long after Khalid left. She wanted to believe him, but the years of betrayal and disappointment had left her cautious. Still, she couldn't deny that something about Khalid was different. The next morning, Claudia summoned Maria to her office. The room, filled with expensive furniture and an air of authority, was where Claudia handled all business matters. "Maria, you've made quite an impression," Claudia said, lighting a cigarette and exhaling a plume of smoke. "Khalid has offered to buy your contract." Maria's heart raced. "What does that mean?" "It means," Claudia said with a smirk, "that he wants you exclusively. For how long, I don't know. But the amount he's offering is significant." Maria's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the chair. "Did he say anything about Liam?" Claudia raised an eyebrow. He mentioned your son, yes. He seems uncharacteristically interested in your situation. It's rare for someone like him to care about such things, but who am I to question it? All I know is that if you agree, you'll be leaving here." Maria sat in stunned silence. The idea of leaving the brothel, of giving Liam a better life, was everything she had dreamed of. But the fear of the unknown loomed large. "What happens if I say no?" Maria asked quietly. Claudia laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the small room. "You stay here, of course. And let's be honest, Maria. How long do you think you can keep this up? You're not like the others. You don't belong here. If I were you, I'd take the deal." Maria spent the rest of the day wrestling with her decision. Liam's face flashed in her mind every time she doubted herself. By the time Khalid returned that evening, she had made up her mind. When he entered her room, Maria stood to greet him. "I've decided," she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "I'll trust you, but if you're lying to me—" "I'm not," Khalid interrupted, his tone firm. "You'll see. By this time tomorrow, you'll be free." True to his word, Khalid finalized the arrangements with Claudia the next day. Maria's contract was torn up, and for the first time in years, she felt the weight of her captivity lift. As she packed her few belongings, Maria glanced at Liam, who was playing with a small toy car Carmen had given him. "Are we going somewhere, Mama?" he asked, his big brown eyes full of curiosity. "Yes, baby," Maria said, her voice breaking with emotion. "We're going somewhere better." The air outside the brothel was crisp and filled with the promise of change. Maria clutched Liam's hand tightly as they stepped into the sleek black car waiting by the curb. Khalid stood by the open door, his commanding presence both reassuring and intimidating. "Get in," he said gently. Maria hesitated for a moment, taking one last look at the brothel, the place that had been her prison and her survival for the past 3 years. Liam, sensing her hesitation, tugged on her hand. "Where are we going, Mama?" he asked, his voice filled with childlike curiosity. "Somewhere safe," Maria replied, sliding into the car and pulling Liam onto her lap. Khalid climbed in beside them, signaling to his driver. "Let's go." The car glided smoothly onto the main road, the hum of the engine a steady backdrop to the tense silence inside. Maria's mind raced with questions she was too afraid to voice. Where were they going? What would happen next? And why had Khalid taken such an interest in her and Liam? Liam, oblivious to his mother's turmoil, stared out the window, fascinated by the city lights flashing past. Khalid, sitting across from them, seemed lost in thought. Every now and then, his gaze flicked toward Maria, as though he wanted to say something but decided against it. The ride was uneventful at first, the quiet streets offering little distraction. But as they approached the outskirts of the city, the atmosphere in the car shifted. Khalid's driver, a stoic man named Ahmed, suddenly stiffened in his seat, his eyes narrowing at the rearview mirror. "What's wrong?" Khalid asked, his voice sharp. Ahmed didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pressed harder on the accelerator, the car picking up speed. "We're being followed," Ahmed said finally, his voice tense. Maria's heart skipped a beat. She turned to look out the back window and saw a black pickup truck gaining on them. The truck's headlights were glaring, its engine roaring as it sped closer. "Who is it?" Maria asked, her voice trembling. Khalid's jaw tightened. "Trouble," he said grimly. The truck swerved, attempting to pull alongside them. Maria could see the driver now, a man in his 40s with a thick beard and a menacing scowl. "Rival?" Ahmed asked, glancing at Khalid in the rearview mirror. "Most likely," Khalid replied, his voice steady despite the tension in the car. Stay focused. Don't let them force us off the road." The truck made another aggressive move, veering dangerously close to their car. Maria instinctively pulled Liam closer, her heart pounding in her chest. "Khalid, what's going on?" she demanded, her voice shaking. Khalid turned to her, his expression unreadable. "It's complicated. Some people don't like my business dealings. Or me. This is their way of sending a message." Maria stared at him in disbelief. "And you thought it was a good idea to drag me and my son into this?" "I didn't expect this," Khalid admitted, his voice low. "But I'll protect you. I promise." The truck roared ahead, cutting them off and forcing Ahmed to slam on the brakes. The sudden stop jolted everyone in the car, and Maria clutched Liam tightly as he let out a frightened cry. "It's not safe here," Ahmed said, his voice clipped. Khalid nodded. "Take the side road." Ahmed maneuvered the car onto a narrow, winding path, the truck hot on their heels. The chase was harrowing, the sound of screeching tires and revving engines filling the night air. Suddenly, the truck rammed into the back of their car, sending a violent jolt through the vehicle. Maria screamed, holding onto Liam as Khalid braced himself against the seat. "Enough," Khalid growled, pulling out his phone. He tapped a number and brought it to his ear. "It's Khalid. We're under attack. Send backup to the southern road near the industrial district. Now." The call was brief, but it gave Maria a sliver of hope. Whoever Khalid had called, she prayed they would arrive soon. The truck rammed them again, this time harder, and Maria felt the car lurch dangerously close to the edge of the road. "Khalid!" she shouted, her voice laced with panic. "Keep calm," Khalid said, his voice firm. "Ahmed, stop the car." "What?" Maria and Ahmed said in unison. "Trust me," Khalid said, his gaze unwavering. Reluctantly, Ahmed obeyed, bringing the car to a screeching halt. The truck pulled up beside them, and two men jumped out, their faces hidden by scarves. "Stay here," Khalid ordered Maria, his tone leaving no room for argument. "What are you doing?" Maria hissed, her grip on Liam tightening. "Ending this," Khalid said as he opened the door and stepped out. Maria watched in horror as Khalid confronted the men. She couldn't hear what was being said, but the tension was palpable. One of the men gestured aggressively, pointing toward the car, and Maria's stomach churned. Before she could process what was happening, the distant sound of engines filled the air. Bright headlights appeared on the horizon, growing closer with each passing second. Backup had arrived. A convoy of black SUVs roared onto the scene, surrounding the pickup truck. Armed men stepped out, their weapons trained on the attackers. The tables had turned in an instant. The two men from the truck hesitated before retreating back into their vehicle. They sped off into the night, their tires kicking up dust as they disappeared. Khalid returned to the car, his expression as calm as if nothing had happened. "Let's go," he said, climbing back in. Maria stared at him, her anger bubbling to the surface. "What the hell was that?" "An inconvenience," Khalid replied simply. "But it's over now." "An inconvenience?" Maria snapped. "My son and I were just caught in the middle of a—" "Maria," Khalid interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. "I told you I'd protect you. I meant it. You're safe now." Maria wanted to argue, but the look in Khalid's eyes silenced her. For better or worse, she had placed her trust in this man. And now, there was no turning back. As the car resumed its journey, Maria held Liam close, her mind racing. The events of the night had shaken her, but they had also revealed something about Khalid, his power, his influence, and his unwavering resolve. Whatever lay ahead, Maria knew her life would never be the same. The convoy of black SUVs finally pulled into the driveway of an expansive estate, tucked away from the chaos of the city. The gates were massive, flanked by security guards who saluted as the cars passed. The estate itself was a vision of luxury. Pristine gardens stretched out in all directions, and the grand mansion loomed like a palace, its lights glowing warmly in the night. Maria sat in stunned silence, clutching Liam tightly. The fear and adrenaline from the chase still lingered, but the sight of such opulence left her breathless. This wasn't just a house, it was a fortress. "We're here," Khalid said, breaking the silence as the car came to a stop. Where is this?" Maria asked, her voice shaky. "My home," Khalid replied simply, stepping out of the car. Maria followed hesitantly, holding Liam's hand as they approached the entrance. The massive double doors swung open, revealing a grand foyer with marble floors, towering ceilings, and a chandelier that glittered like 1,000 stars. "Welcome," Khalid said, his tone warm but reserved. A woman in a crisp uniform approached, bowing slightly before speaking. "Shall I prepare rooms for the guests, sir?" "Yes," Khalid said, glancing at Maria. "Prepare the west wing. They'll need time to rest." The woman nodded and disappeared down the hall. Khalid turned to Maria, his expression softening. "You're safe here. No one will hurt you or Liam." Maria nodded, still overwhelmed by the sheer scale of everything around her. "Thank you," she said quietly. Khalid gestured for her to follow, leading her through a maze of hallways until they reached a set of double doors. Inside was a beautifully furnished suite, complete with a sitting area, a bedroom, and a small adjoining room that seemed perfect for Liam. "This is where you'll stay," Khalid said. "You'll have everything you need. If you require anything, just ask." Maria sat Liam down, and he immediately ran to the small room, his laughter echoing as he explored. Maria turned to Khalid, her emotions threatening to spill over. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "You don't need to," Khalid replied. "Rest tonight. We'll talk tomorrow." He left her alone then, closing the door softly behind him. Maria sank onto the bed, the events of the day crashing down on her all at once. She watched Liam playing with a toy he'd found on the small bedside table, his laughter filling the room with a lightness she hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long while, Maria allowed herself to hope. The next morning, Maria woke to the sound of birds chirping outside her window. The sunlight streamed in, bathing the room in a golden glow. For a moment, she forgot where she was. "Mama, look!" Liam said excitedly, holding up a stuffed animal he'd found in the room. Maria smiled, her heart swelling at his happiness. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." A soft knock at the door interrupted the moment. When Maria opened it, a maid stood outside, holding a tray with breakfast. "Good morning, miss," the maid said with a polite smile. "Mr. Khalid has asked me to bring this to you. He also requested your presence in the garden when you're ready." Maria thanked her, closing the door and setting the tray on the table. The spread was more food than she'd seen in weeks: fresh fruit, warm pastries, eggs, and a pot of steaming coffee. After they ate, Maria dressed Liam and herself in the fresh clothes provided by the staff. They made their way downstairs, where a guard escorted them to the garden. Khalid was waiting for them under a pergola, draped with flowering vines. He stood as they approached, gesturing for Maria to sit. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Better," Maria admitted. "Thank you for everything," Khalid nodded. "You've been through a lot, Maria, but you're strong, stronger than most." Maria looked down, unsure how to respond. Khalid's intense gaze made her feel both exposed and seen in a way she wasn't used to. "I have a proposition for you," Khalid said, breaking the silence. Maria tensed, her mind racing. She had been waiting for the catch, the moment when Khalid revealed what he wanted in return for his generosity. "I want you to stay here," Khalid continued, "not just as my guest, but as part of my household. I'll provide for you and Liam, ensure that you have everything you need. In return, I ask for your trust." Maria blinked, taken aback. "Why? Why would you do this for us?" Khalid sighed, his expression softening. "Because I see myself in you," he said quietly. "I know what it's like to fight for survival, to do whatever it takes to protect the people you love. And because I care." Maria's heart skipped a beat. There was something in Khalid's voice, a vulnerability that caught her off guard. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "Say yes," Khalid said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. The days turned into weeks, and Maria began to settle into her new life. She took time to adjust, learning the rhythms of the household and growing closer to Khalid. He was patient, never pushing her for more than she was willing to give. But his kindness and unwavering support slowly broke down the walls she had built around herself. Liam adored Khalid, and the feeling seemed mutual. Khalid spent hours with the boy, teaching him to read, play games, and even showing him the intricacies of his business. For the first time in his young life, Liam had a father figure, and Maria couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude every time she saw them together. As time passed, Maria realized that her feelings for Khalid were growing. It wasn't just gratitude. She admired his strength, his integrity, and the way he treated her and Liam as though they were the most important people in the world. One evening, as they sat together on the terrace, Khalid turned to her with a serious expression. "Maria, I need to ask you something," he said. Maria's heart raced. "What is it?" Khalid took a deep breath. "Will you marry me?" The question hung in the air, and for a moment, Maria was too stunned to speak. "Khalid, I know this is sudden," Khalid said quickly, "and I don't want you to feel pressured. But I care about you, Maria. I care about Liam. I want us to be a family." Maria looked into his eyes and saw the sincerity there. It wasn't just an offer of security. It was a declaration of love. "Yes," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I'll marry you." The wedding was a quiet affair, held in the garden where Khalid had first proposed. Maria wore a simple yet elegant dress, and Liam stood proudly at her side as Khalid placed the ring on her finger. Their life together wasn't without challenges, but it was filled with love, understanding, and hope. Khalid kept his promise, giving Maria and Liam a life they had never dreamed possible. In time, they welcomed a daughter, completing their family. Maria often reflected on her journey, the pain, the struggles, and the unexpected twists of fate that had led her to this moment. Against all odds, she had found happiness. And for the first time in her life, Maria felt truly free. Did this touching story of hope and perseverance inspire you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. What moved you the most? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and discover more uplifting tales of courage and transformation on our channel. Together, let's celebrate the power of kindness and the resilience of the human spirit. See you in the next heartwarming story.